Running around and collecting things in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom can be very tiring and time inefficient, particularly if you have disabilities. One way to mitigate that is Nintendo's Amiibos. When scanned, each will give you several item drops, available once per day, saving you from foraging so much. Each Amiibo's drop comes from a random pool, which also depends on how far you are through the game, so you can't really control what you get. A bunch of them are compatible with those two Zelda games on Switch and Wii U. However, even once you've got the full set of compatible Amiibos, they are pretty unwieldy to apply one by one, particularly if you have wrist problems like me. To mitigate that, for any Amiibos you've bought, there exist Amiibo coins and cards which are purchasable as more portable backups, and contain the same near-field communication data as the coins in the base of the models. Now make sure you only purchase backups of Amiibos you've already bought. Don't go over to eBay or AliExpress and spend £15 on a 40 card or coin set to save you several £100s, because if Nintendo saw you had those, they'd be very unhappy with you. A friend of mine has brought their full set in a box that's off to the side, plus their backup cards. The cards come in two sizes, business card size and these really tiny ones. Having the larger cards in a card holder seems sensible until you actually want to use them, and then you're flipping through lots of pages or awkwardly positioning the card carrier for each scan. Neither are good for me. The smaller cards look like they would be too fiddly, but here we can do some crafts. Get some sellotape and a bunch of 15cm rulers, and go for the cheap transparent ones. You can fit 7 of these mini cards on a 15cm ruler, and sellotape will hold them on. If you want them neatly aligned like this, then it's worth lining them up before taping. Place a long piece of tape connecting their backs and you can attach all of them to the ruler at once. Once constructed, this means instead of dozens of unwieldy models or cards or loose coins to struggle to hold, you'll just have 6 lightweight rulers. Which way up you tape the cards is your choice. The cards will work upside down, they kind of work through the rulers, but probably best not to rely on that. Also, if you have the Loftwing Amiibo and therefore its card, it's worth putting the card at the end of its ruler. In Skyward Sword HD, the Loftwing Amiibo can be used to return to the sky at any time, instead of having to find a checkpoint statue on the ground. And then in the sky you can scan it again to be warped back to where you were, which is almost an accessibility tool and certainly a time-saving tool. Still, in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, these cards and Amiibos will mostly drop resources. While it is repetitive to scan all your duplicates, it means you can start each day's play session with a fresh batch of resources and weapons, all acquired more quickly than foraging. So if you are a disabled gamer, these too can become an accessibility tool. Be aware that if you keep on scanning without collecting the items, the game will reach its item limit and older materials and chests will disappear. So it's important to run around and collect them at least every 2 drops. As I said, it's repetitive. Now for a practical demo, if in Breath of the Wild I've just finished the Magnesis Shrine, which unlocks the Amiibo rune, and all I've got is an axe. If 38 cards are scanned, we have a good bunch of weapons. My swords were so full I had to let go of a couple of Traveller's swords. I'm full of bows with 4 arrow types, plus 4 shields, 3 special armor pieces, and over 60 unique materials. Similarly, after the Ultra Hand Shrine in Tears of the Kingdom, if 38 cards are scanned when having a near-empty inventory, we get a strong bow, over 100 arrows, a couple swords, and absolutely loads of food and materials, plus some cooked meals and several exclusive paraglider designs for later in the game. Scanning the same set in a much later save file gave a few more weapons and shields, showing how it limits what it drops in the early game. On the Wii U gamepad, it seemed extremely keen to detect the cards once they were anywhere near the scanning area, so it was actually a bit more difficult to scan individual ones from the mini cards. For scanning on the Switch, I found it kind of helped to swipe the card up and over the joystick rather than just place it on top. In both cases, stocking up like this would mean being able to put your limited energy into more of the gameplay, though it can take about 15 minutes to scan 38 cards, including smashing barrels and metal crates that fall down. So like I say, conceptually the Amiibos are kind of like an accessibility DLC for those 2 games, plus Skyward Sword HD, which is a bit ethically iffy if you think about the total cost of all compatible Amiibos, how tools which disabled players could really benefit from are locked behind a massive paywall. But in Tears of the Kingdom I duplicate my items anyway, so my friend can take these rulers with their Amiibo box as they leave.